Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Robin, and you're listening to Bowel Moments,
the podcast sharing real talk about the realities of IBD. Served on the rocks. This week, we talked to Alex Boyd. Alex was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis when she was only 26 years old in a very dramatic fashion. We talked to her about her J-pouch surgery and some of the issues that she's dealt with since then, including chronic pouchitis, cufitis, and a mucosectomy. We talked to her about how her illness has led her to examine the relationships in her life and to focus on finding the ones that feed her and give her what she needs. We talked to her about workplace accommodations and asking for what you need in that arena as well. And we talked to her about mental health and how that's so important to focus on while you're dealing with all of these other stressors in your life. Cheers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bowel Moments. This is Robin.
Hey, guys. This is Alicia, and we are so excited to be joined by Alex Boyd tonight. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Well, we are excited to hear your story in just a second. But of course, our very first unprofessional question is, what are you drinking?
I am a little bit boring tonight, so I have electrolytes. I'm on the ciproflagyl train right now, so no adult beverages, but
that's okay. But electrolytes are good for you, especially for our J-pouchers. And so, I'm sorry, I kind of dropped the lead on that one, but it is good for people to stay hydrated that have IBD. So good job.
I'm pretty consistent with my electrolytes, usually once or twice a day. Just those without a colon understand.
We've heard a lot of people talk about it too. So it's good advice. Robin, what about you? What are you drinking?
Also, to make it more exciting, I like to call them electric lights. I'm drinking my electric lights. I mean, you could say it's boring, but I feel like it's exciting. I'm drinking key lime high sparkling water. It's bubbly or bubbly. Nice. I saw this last night and I was like, ooh, I'm getting it for the show.
Awesome. Well, I am drinking a rhubarb sour. I haven't tried it.
I love it.
I'm a little afraid of it.
That sounds amazing. Living vicariously through you right now.
Alex, welcome to the show. Again, we're very excited, but first we'll say cheers.
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 That's dangerously yummy. Alex, next question for you. Tell us your IBD story. What brings you into our community?
Yeah, I will start by saying IBD hit me like a bus out of the blue. I was a completely healthy 26-year-old working full time, nothing abnormal. I had some coworkers that were in and out with stomach bugs. Everybody seemed to be getting it. And so I assumed that that's what happened to me until it lasted for months. I started losing weight. I couldn't eat much, couldn't drink, was in and out of urgent care, not really understanding what was going on. It was completely abnormal for me. And long story short, I ended up being admitted eventually after an emergency scope. And that's when they diagnosed me. It was February of 2020. And 3 weeks later, I was in the hospital and had a couple of rounds of biologics, Remicade. Nothing seemed to be getting better, and they told me my only option was surgery. So it was at that point, after 2 weeks of diagnosis, I was without a colon, not really understanding the implications either, that meant I was going to wake up with an ostomy. That was a complete shock to me. So it was maybe 2 months total where I had symptoms. They got really bad, and then I had my colon out right away. So my introduction to IBD was very abrupt. And since then, I have gone through with the J-pouch surgeries, many complications along the way, including chronic cufitis, chronic pouchitis, which has been resistant to most treatments. Typically, ciproflagyl is the treatment option. I've tried biologics, and that didn't work very well. So since then, I've had a mucosectomy, a J-pouch advancement, which essentially they take out the part that connects your J-pouch out. And I'm really just dealing with a lot of ongoing issues with my J-pouch. It hasn't been the most straightforward process for me, but I am working through treatment options again, looking at biologics, and I'm really just happy to be here and to still be kicking. So a little bit of a Spark Note summary of my journey with IBD.
We're obviously going to ask you to elaborate because that was definitely Cliff's Notes. But for everything that you've been through in 3 years is like what half of our guests have been through in 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 years. And you've been through that in 3 years. I mean, I'm just floored by the fact that we are in 2023 and you were diagnosed in 2020 and they only tried one biologic and went immediately to taking your colon out. Do you mind talking to us about that a little bit? I'm really curious to know how that went for you when they just tried Remicade and then said, okay, that's it. We've got to take out your colon.
Yeah, that seems really abrupt.
Yes.
Absolutely, it was. And I think the first part that I will say is at that point, I was so out of it. I had lost 40 pounds. I felt like a zombie, to be honest. And my primary care doctor fought tooth and nail for me to get that emergency scope. They were trying to book that out months. And she had seen me in and out of urgent care, I kid you not, probably 10 times. I would get fluids and then they would send me home. And so at that point, I was so out of it. I didn't have enough in me to push back or to even know what to push back on. I needed relief. And they had the whole colorectal team come in and talk to me about my results on Remicade, about my scope. The scope was so bad that they couldn't even get through my colon. And so I had that initial scope, was sent home. They put me on prednisone and said, this should do it. We'll call you in a couple weeks and figure out long-term treatment. And that never happened. So I was admitted, and then they did another scope there and it got worse. They couldn't even get up the last part of my colon. And at that point, they said Remicade was the strongest option and it didn't do anything. So their recommendation was take your colon out. I had no familiarity with IBD. Nobody in my family did. This was the beginning of COVID, so I could only have my partner at the time there with me. And neither of us really knew enough to say, what else can we try? We believed them, and we didn't really know the implications of getting your colon out either. I didn't know that meant I was going to wake up with a bag. I didn't know that that meant that I would deal with these complications for the rest of my life. So it was a lack of education, a lack of familiarity with IBD, and being at a point where I was struggling so hard to make it through the day and had no energy or fight in me to even advocate for myself.
To be fair, I went through something similar. I was not sick for years when my colon came out. So I don't want you to think that you're like, oh, I could have had all these other choices. I lost my colon very quickly also. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, it's still happening. Like IBD is still doing that to people. So I don't want you to be like, oh, these doctors just took your colon out without even, because it happened to me too. It's just, to me, 23 years in, it's like people, IBD is still doing it to people. So it's just,
And it's surprising to hear that they didn't do that education with, like, the colorectal team, surgeon team didn't say, hey, here's the process. Like, step 1, we take the colon out, we give you an ostomy. Step 2 is this, like, and like we do this, whatever it is. So it's really surprising to hear that that wasn't part of what they talked about. Gosh. Yeah. Very dramatic.
I think it's also hard too when you're in such a state of poor health and something abrupt like that happens, and you have to rely very heavily on your support team to advocate for you, to ask the right questions. Because when you're so sick, you can't physically take care of yourself, much less mentally make choices and understand the implications. I'm sure that you guys have been in that situation, and many listeners probably can resonate with that too, where you're not the same mentally as you are when you're healthy. And so making those decisions when this is something that's brand new to you is really difficult. And understanding what that means for the rest of your life is really difficult. And knowing what I know now, I'm thankful that my journey went as quickly as it did, because I see people fight so hard every day and go through these journeys for decades. So in some regards, I am thankful that this hit me like a train and I got very sick very quickly and didn't go through that long of a journey initially.
I have said that too, Alex. I've said that too. I'm very grateful that I had to have surgery right away.
I think a lot of people too teeter with that decision on when is the right time to
Mhm.
say, I need to go with the surgical option. That's what's best for me. And when that choice is, in a sense, taken from you, where that's your only option, it is easier in some regards. However weird that sounds, I am thankful that I wasn't in the position to have to make that decision.
As you were talking, it just made me think also, you said you just lost 40 pounds during that time too. I mean, when you're malnourished, you also are not thinking as clearly because your body is like, I'm just trying to survive over here. Like higher processing skills can wait a little bit. So
Mhm.
it is a very kind of a time when you need some help making these decisions and understanding the implications. And so I hadn't necessarily thought this is the first time I really had that thought, but like you legit are malnourished and that's real hard on your body. So boy, that is super interesting.
I look back on that and giggle too, because at that point I was surviving on a diet of Pedialyte and popcorn, which most people with J pouches and digestive issues now know that popcorn is a no-no for a lot of people. And that just goes to show how ill-informed I was, what would be good for my body at that point. So I can't help but laugh looking back.
Some people can do popcorn, but I mean, maybe it wasn't it wasn't the best choice. Well, it sounds like you did what was best for you at that time and what, your medical team was really advocating for. And so, that's good. But it does sound like, yeah, again, there was maybe some implications of it that you hadn't quite grasped, but you have definitely dealt with some stuff that some of our other folks haven't necessarily talked about, or I'm sure they probably dealt with it, but they haven't talked about it. But you talked about chronic pouchitis, mucosectomy. Did I say it right? Okay.
Nailed it.
Thanks. And cuffitis. Can you talk a little bit about what those things are and how did you know this was going on? What does this do for your J pouch?
Yeah, I've dealt with super high frequencies since I had my initial takedown in 2021. I had my colectomy in March of 2020, and then the whole COVID thing happened, and I was in really poor shape. So it took me a while between my colectomy and my first J pouch surgery. So I had my first J pouch surgery in October of 2020, and then my takedown in February of 2020. And from that initial point, I was still going 15, 20 times a day, maybe more than that. So my surgeon knew that that wasn't normal. They say as you adjust and as time goes on, your J pouch learns, it expands, it kind of takes on the role of the colon. But I was still going to the bathroom as much as I was when I was really sick. And so they tried all of the antibiotics, they did scopes, they saw that everything was super angry all the time. And I was forming fistulas and abscesses from those getting infected. And it was just not a great situation. And that persisted pretty much consistently until today. So we tried biologics again, tried Remicade again, tried Entyvio and Humira, and pretty much everything to get some relief from the constant inflammation. It was very similar symptoms to IBD when I was very sick, increased frequency, blood, not being able to eat normally or leave the house because you're going to the bathroom so much. So it was really about, at that point, advocating. I think the hard piece is not knowing what the J pouch is supposed to feel like. I didn't know what good looked like for a J pouch. This was a completely new ball game for me. So I had to rely really heavily on my doctors to say, is this normal? Is this not normal? And fight with them to continue to get scopes and see what was going on inside. We went through all of the treatment options they could think of, the antibiotics, the biologics, and that's when we decided to go through with the mucosectomy because my inflammation was resistant to the drug treatment. And so that was kind of a last hurrah for my J pouch. And there are complications, and I can share more about that too with having the cuff taken out. That's the mucosectomy and J pouch advancement essentially is removing the cuff portion, which is left in. It connects the J pouch to the anus and is supposed to help with allowing for control and allowing to sense the difference between gas and stool. That's the reason they keep it in for most J-pouch patients. But because of the inflammation that I had in there and the fistulas that formed, they suggested that taking it out would be a good option for me.
But what did that do for your J pouch? Because it seems like if you need that to sense, is it stool, is it gas, it seems like it wouldn't necessarily, it seems like that would create more of an urgency, more of a like more output just in and of itself.
So I still have, I like to say that I solved some problems and I caused some other problems. So I knew going through with this, it meant that I had an increased risk of lack of control, incontinence, and that has proven to be the case. I don't have the ability to sense the difference between gas and stool. I think most J-pouchers, for the most part, have that same issue, but now I have more leakage problems. I've lost a lot of sensation on when I need to go. And especially at night when I'm not conscious, I don't really know when I need to go. So I have a lot of leakage problems at night. I will say, though, my urgency is much less now that I've had the mucosectomy, and that inflammation is no longer there. It has improved in a lot of ways. And now we're just fighting the battle with pouchitis. And so we're looking at biologics as a treatment option for that. Most of my problems were due to cophitis. And with that being gone, I've gotten a lot of relief with the additional leakage being added.
So, question out of left field, have your surgeons suggested pelvic floor physical therapy?
I did actually ask my surgeon about pelvic floor therapy prior to the mucosectomy procedure because of the risk of incontinence. So I went through months of pelvic floor therapy, not even realizing how bad my pelvic floor was. I went into the therapy wanting to strengthen things ahead of the mucosectomy and was subsequently shown that my pelvic floor was super weak to begin with. So it definitely has helped. And I'm trying to do everything that I can to support my body, not just through medication, but through things like pelvic floor therapy, things like dietary changes, taking supplements, psyllium husk, things like that to bulk up my stool and prevent as many issues as I can. So I'm trying to take the more holistic approach to dealing with symptoms of IBD still. And I've been really impressed with the care that my GI team has provided. It was something that my surgeon recommended. My GI doctor is very adamant about watching my labs, monitoring my diet, and trying to supplement as much as possible to prevent poor quality of life.
I'm happy to hear that because I do think there are still some doctors, and our folks have unfortunately talked about them, that don't always buy into the other aspects of what you could do to really improve quality of life. They're like, we're going to get you asymptomatic or as asymptomatic as possible. And that's kind of, that's their job. And they kind of think of the rest of it as maybe not the rest of their job. So it's nice to hear that your team is working on that. And also, I'm really happy to hear about the pelvic floor physical therapy. That's one that, even the pelvic floor physical therapists are like, we wish more referrals came our way. So that's very cool. One of the things that you put on your questionnaire is that you wanted to talk about is workplace accommodations. I mean, as Robin pointed out, this was really fast onset. You got very, very sick and it was really acute. And I would imagine in there that created some issues with your employer and trying to get some accommodations. Maybe COVID helped some of that, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think I've been extremely lucky with my employer supporting me through multiple leaves. I think I've used my FMLA time every year since I was diagnosed. The piece that really stuck out to me that was challenging was we went full remote with COVID, and that was great. They adapted really quickly. It was a great position for me to be in because I could be at the comfort of my home. I could do a sitz bath over lunch if I needed to, or whenever during the day, which was a very frequent thing for me. And then post-COVID, they started sending people back to the office half-time. And that was when I was raising the red flag, like, my quality of life is much better at home when I can take a sitz bath if I need it, or I can run to the bathroom and not worry about having coworkers in there every time I'm using the bathroom, or I have my bidet at home and I'm much more comfortable when I'm at home. And the process that they put in place was requiring medical exemptions, and it was requiring a form from my doctor telling them that I had a disability and that I physically couldn't work. And I had those conversations with my doctor, and most people with J pouches are able to work physically. He couldn't sign off on saying, Alex can't work, because I can. What I needed to do was advocate for myself. And so that required meeting with our HR and talking through very vividly what I deal with on a daily basis. It's something that I wish I didn't have to do, but for me to get accommodations at work, it was a very lengthy phone call with an HR representative talking about how often I use the bathroom, what the experience is like when I use the bathroom, what types of things I need to do at home to make myself more comfortable. And they went from, I kid you not, I had that meeting, told her I couldn't get the disability form filled out. And then the next day they're like, yep, we're going to just give you an exemption. And not going to lie, I was super shocked that the turnaround was that quickly. But I don't think people understand the implications of IBD and what people deal with on a daily basis. I could see her in the Zoom call and how shocked she was and not knowing really how to respond to the things that I was sharing. I know that not everybody is as open with their journey as I've been, and I was uncomfortable, but I'm used to telling my story. I'm used to sharing with people around me the things that I deal with. So it wasn't as big of a deal as it might be for some people. It is being extremely vulnerable in a really odd setting. I never thought I would talk about my bowel movements with my employer, but you do what you gotta do.
I do think that's one of the good things that came out of COVID is that you had already just proven for 2 years, probably at that point, that you could do your job from home perfectly capably, probably super well. And so it's not as if like they could say, well, but you can't do your job now. You're like, but I just did my job from home. So I do think that has been helpful because there's just now you have a model to point back to be able to say, but I did that. So you can't really use the argument that it can't happen. So that's a fortunate thing. But you're right. That's a really vulnerable place to be and not typically something they ask for either. Like that's kind of, a lot of times, especially if you're asking for accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which by the way, inflammatory bowel disease is in the is one of the covered diseases for the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's typically just you have to disclose you have an illness and that you need accommodations. But I guess maybe in this case, because of what you were asking, it's not like just a desk closer to the bathroom. It's that you wanted your desk to be physically located in your home.
That was the first thing that they came back with was, okay, well, we can put a desk close to the bathroom so that you can get there if you need to. And for me, that wasn't enough. I think unless you go through what we go through and you understand not just the physical discomfort, but having to go to the bathroom as much as we do and it not always being quiet and it being smelly and all of those things with people in a professional setting is really hard to deal with mentally too. The stigma associated with our disease and going to the bathroom, like nobody wants to talk about it. So I think not only just the physical aspects of this, but the social, mental challenges that go along with IBD, they're real. And if I could share one thing when it comes to asking for accommodations is we hear about this repeatedly in the medical setting, but when asking for accommodations too, keep pushing. I couldn't get the disability form signed and I was not happy with their answer of putting my desk closer to the bathroom. So if you are willing, continue to fight and advocate for yourself. If that means sharing the day-to-day details, I think you'll be surprised. I hope you'll be surprised by the support that you can receive from employers. I think there's a lack of understanding of the day-to-day implications of this disease and what that means in a workplace.
And not that this is the reason why you're doing it. You're obviously doing it for yourself, but the next person who comes to that job and says, I have IBD and I need accommodations, there's a precedent that's already been set. And maybe that person won't have to go into the detail that you've had to go into. I mean, hopefully they wouldn't have to go into the detail that you've had to go into. But also, we talk on the show and laugh about the fact that everybody poops and normalizing poop and removing the stigma and stuff. But there is a difference also between what you just said. Going to the bathroom in a public bathroom in a professional setting where you're going to the bathroom with the same people every day and they see your desk close to the bathroom and they know why your desk is close to the bathroom when then just going to a public bathroom where you're never going to see those people again. It doesn't matter if it's noisy or smelly or any of those things. That's just a random bathroom in a public setting. But, in a professional setting where it's your office mates, you may not know all of these people very well. Depending on the office, they just know that your desk is next to that bathroom that they go to all the time. And there's a reason why your desk is next to that bathroom. It's a different mental battle and burden, a mental burden to carry.
Yeah, I think that I would struggle with that for sure. I'm curious if when you were working with your provider, you said, your provider seemed really invested in doing kind of a holistic thing. Was mental health part of what they talked to you about as well? Was that something they encouraged?
Yeah, that was actually something that came out of my mucosectomy surgery. I went back and forth on that decision for months. I met with my surgeon 4 or 5 times to talk about that surgery, the implications, the things that I was nervous about. And she actually pointed out that my demeanor was very different, that at that point I had struggled with pouchitis and cuphitis for so long. I had a fistula that was leaking. I had to wear pads every day because I had stool coming out of places where it shouldn't. And it was physically impacting my life so much. And she asked if that was something that I was interested in pursuing. They had a therapist specific to the colorectal team, which was surprising to me. And honestly, surprising that they didn't suggest it sooner after the entire journey. I was a frequent flyer there. I was sick for so long and had so many surgeries in between my colectomy and my J pouch and really struggled to get healthy. So I was surprised that they didn't offer it sooner, but I was glad nonetheless that they brought it up and that they were observant enough to realize how much this was impacting my life and my demeanor, how I showed up, even with people that didn't know me personally. So I did do several months of therapy with the counselor at the IBD clinic or the colorectal clinic. And we worked through the trauma associated with going through a medical journey. A lot of the things that I struggled with were the ability to rely on my body and to have any sort of confidence in my body, the fear of what the future could hold. And I also recently went through a divorce and separated from the person who went through this whole journey with me. So being able to rely on myself and not have that support system, that was a really hard piece too. Not only relying on your body, but believing that you can get through this on your own too, and that you can meet people who will support you and will love you and be there for you despite your illness. That was a big fear for me. So working through what that looked like and getting past, I don't even want to say getting past because I don't think you ever get past the trauma, but getting to a place where I can acknowledge where I was and where I am and the tools that I have to move forward. All of that was life-changing for me. Addressing the mental impacts of IBD is just as important, if not more important, than the physical impacts of IBD.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's a really unspoken aspect, I think, of living with a chronic illness that it can be incredibly challenging on a couple, regardless of who they are, to have this other almost person in the relationship that really takes a lot of time and resources and thought and investment. And it's difficult. It can be incredibly difficult. When I worked for the MS Society, I did a program there that was, I don't remember the name of it, but basically the reason that they had put it together is because the divorce rate for people with multiple sclerosis was higher than it was for kind of the average population. And even that's pretty darn high. And so, and it was really because, again, there's this like, yes, you say in sickness and in health, but sometimes when that reality hits, it is a real struggle for people sometimes. And so I do think that I'm glad that your therapist worked with you to try to get through that and to realize that, yes, this is something you can do on your own, and that this is an additional trauma that needs to be worked through, or an additional aspect of your life that needs to be through. So I appreciate you talking about that, because I do think it's very hard. It's really hard to be in a relationship, number one, it just altogether, but it's really hard when there's, again, this thing that's in with your relationship with you.
I also joke about this quite a bit, but I do see my journey with IBD, the way that it played out as a trigger to reflect a lot on my life. I call it my midlife crisis at 25, 26 years old. But it really was. I think the piece for me when I got healthy, I realized how quickly things can shift. I went from healthy to almost dead nearly overnight. And that forces you to reflect on how fragile life is. And yes, my medical journey, the physical part of my medical journey weighed on my relationship, but also that forced reflection makes you think about what you want in life. And that was really a trigger for me to say, is this relationship right for me? Is what I'm doing with my life right for me? Sickness does that. It forces you to look at your life because it puts it all in perspective. You can get sick overnight and everything can change overnight. And for that, I'm thankful. It feels like a weird thing to say, but I am thankful for my disease and how it shaped me. I am a better person because of my journey. I am a more empathetic person because of my journey. And I am changing things in my life that no longer serve me because of IBD.
I wasn't officially divorced, but I was separated 2.5 years after my surgery. In the 2 to 3 year after my diagnosis, I was.
It reminds me a little bit too of what we talked about, and gosh, I don't remember which one this was, but like that, it's actually the EMDR episode we just put out here like recently. That sense of urgency that almost comes along with this. It's like that, like I have this moment right now, and I know that it's not a given that tomorrow is going to be that same moment, and so I'm going to go out and live my fucking life right now.
That's right.
Because I have this moment, and to really like that, just grab the opportunity that's there and to live your life in sort of a slightly more urgent manner. And so
that's right.
I think there can be some real positivity that can come with it, because you're right. You say like, this life isn't serving me. This relationship isn't serving me. This moment isn't, this job isn't, this town isn't, whatever it is.
All of those things.
Yeah. So I think there's some real potential there. There's also some, as I said, there's also potential for you to like go off the rails, but
no, I don't know.
Everything in moderation, perhaps still.
No,
she just says,
even with the faults, no. I sincerely appreciate that perspective that I've been able to have for the past 20 years over just the drudgery of what life could have been. Like just having that new lens.
I think my life would have looked so different now if I had 100%. Not gotten sick. I would have stayed. I would have not even known that I wanted different things. I wouldn't have had that period of reflection. You know what I did? I got divorced. I took several months in Colorado. I climbed mountains. I met new people. I pushed myself to do the things that I had put off for so long that I knew I wanted, but because of this disease, it forced me to do it. It forced me to take my life into my own hands and enjoy the time that I have, because it's not promised. And for that, I'm thankful. The good days feel so much better now because I know how tough some days can be. So when you have a good day, it's just, I feel like I'm on cloud 9 when everything goes my way. And that perspective you don't have until you deal with the things that we deal with.
That's really lovely. I'm glad that that's the case for you. I'm glad that's what you took out of this and allowed that to become that positive force in your life. It's really beautiful. I feel like I got to go get some shit done now. Like now I'm like, God, I really got to climb some mountains or something. So
And don't get me wrong, I have my tough days and I have my days where I don't have this perspective because sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. When you're deep in it and when you're in a flare or when you can't leave your house because you can't get off the toilet, those days are hard. And those are the days where I find relying on my support system and reaching out and being vulnerable about where you are mentally and physically, that helps. You don't have to go through this alone. And I truly believe that being vulnerable and sharing with others is the key. The people that judge you or the people that make comments, rude comments, those aren't your people. There are people out there that will accept you and that will support you when you're at the lowest of lows. And those are your people, and lean on them when you have those tough days.
Sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel is a flashlight, and sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel is a train. So, like, I mean, those are the days, right? Those are the days that you have. You can't, when you say you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, well, yeah, you can see the light, but sometimes it feels like it's a train, and sometimes it feels like it's a flashlight.
And sometimes it's the big, beautiful sun, but hopefully it's more those days than the train. That's for sure. I am curious, you talk about building a support system after some reflection and you come to the decision that this, again, your life, that your current situation was not serving you. How did you make sure you built additional supports to kind of take the place? I mean, you mentioned like really working on relying on yourself and getting to that place of really like trusting yourself, trusting your body again. But did you also add some folks to your list of supporters? And how did you go about that?
Absolutely. I think the first step was truly building that confidence in myself that I can do all of the things that I need to do to be successful. That includes putting plans in place if something were to happen and I didn't have somebody living with me. What would I do? That includes reflecting on all of the doctor's appointments that I went to on my own. I have done all of these things. I can continue to do those things. So building confidence in myself was step one. Step two was really being vulnerable. I like to say doing things scared. It is scary to open up to people about your daily struggles. It is uncomfortable, and it is because there is a stigma associated with going to the bathroom, and that's the reality for us. But I found that people respond. People appreciate being let in, and they will show up for you. So I started by doing it scared and doing it despite the fact that I did not want to tell anybody. On the days where I was struggling, instead of doing what comes naturally to me, which is becoming a hermit and wallowing and crying endlessly on my own, instead of doing that, when I started to feel those things, that's when I reached out and asked for an ear, asked for a shoulder to cry on, and I have not had a single person turn away from me. I've had people make rude comments about my ostomy before. Those aren't my people, and I've realized that. But opening up and being vulnerable was a huge step in building a support system for me, and a very necessary step because I still have those tough days and days where I cannot get through it on my own. So I encourage everybody to do it scared, to share, and you will be surprised at how your vulnerability allows other people to open up as well, because in the same vein, people don't know what we're going through and we don't know what they're going through. Opening up in the workplace, for example, allowed one of my coworkers to share that she also has a J pouch. She also has IBD. I worked with her for 3 years and had no idea. And the second I opened up and shared with some of my peers about what I was going through, they started sharing with me. I have that one coworker who has the J pouch. I have another coworker I've worked with very closely who has IBD as well, and he's on mesalamine. You will be amazed at what people share with you once you're vulnerable and share with them. So my advice is to do it, share, let the people in, let them support you.
That's awesome. One, frankly, also sometimes you see the the people you don't want to be with too.
Very true.
Just weed people out, weed people in. Not a bad thing. But I think, I mean, we've talked about Brene Brown on the show before too, like, and about, and authenticity builds authenticity. Authenticity finds authenticity. And people respond to that. I think people can really tell when you're not being your authentic self and they don't trust you when that's the case. But you're right. When you start sharing something that's personal, that's tough, there's people want to connect with you. So they are more likely to share with you. And I think that's really great. That's awesome.
I was going to say something snarky like that sounds horrible.
Talking to people?
I agree.
Yes. Yes. Being vulnerable in a workplace, it sounds disgusting.
It is.
As I do this podcast with Alicia, where I do nothing but be vulnerable and text her later and say, please edit me out of these shows.
And I don't. And I don't listen to you.
Okay, I'll ask this question because I'm going to bring you back because I also got divorced after diagnosis, very dramatic surgery in the hospital, was dying, all of that stuff, ended up getting divorced. But I am remarried now. I've been remarried for 14 years. And like that whole meeting somebody new and having to be vulnerable with that person and share like, hi, I don't have a colon. That whole thing is not for the faint of heart. So is that something you've thought about? Is that something you're looking forward to? Is because you just talked about being vulnerable in the workplace and sharing with your colleagues and stuff. Is that something that is on the horizon for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that's made me really nervous, to be honest. But I truly buy into the fact that people that are for you and that are worth your time will accept you as you are. So my approach to meeting people has been being very upfront and sharing what I need, not being afraid to say, hey, you know what? I can't meet you at a bar because I can't drink, because I'm on antibiotics, because XYZ. I lay it all out there. And if that's too much or too scary or not something that they're willing to support, that's on them and that's their journey. People who are for me and worth my time will say, okay, let's go grab a coffee then. So that's kind of been my approach. And I have met somebody who has accepted me for who I am. I'm able to share what I'm comfortable with doing on dates, etc., all of the things that go along with living with IBD. And there's no judgment, nothing but support. I talked about, I will be completely transparent and vulnerable here in saying one of the biggest challenges I've had is since my mucosectomy, leakage at night and having to wear adult diapers because I can't trust my body at night. That's my reality. And that was probably the biggest, the scariest thing that I've had to do is say, hey, you know what? This is what I have to do to be comfortable. This is me. This is the real raw Alex. And you know what I was met with? Somebody who ordered them for me and had them for me. And none of that is possible without me being vulnerable and transparent. And the reality is our situations can suck. And it's not where I thought I would be at 30 years old, but it is my situation and people will surprise you. The people who are for you will surprise you. So that's kind of the approach I've taken to meeting new people, romantically, friendships, colleagues, all avenues of life. Being upfront with who I am, what I need has led to some truly wonderful relationships in my life.
I commend you, especially romantically. I don't know. I feel like women try to, for lack of a better phrase, like put their best foot forward. But in our situation, especially our situation, meaning people with IBD who have had surgery, J pouch, ostomy, whatever that looks like, I feel like I don't know, man. I feel like you kind of just have to lay it out there because there's only so much you can hide. There's only so much of this that you can hide if you're in a real relationship. There's only so much of the bathroom situation you can hide if you're spending the night with somebody. There's only so much of it you can hide, and you'd be putting yourself under more stress, which could exacerbate symptoms, which would only make it worse. And I don't know, when I first met Matt, we lived in different states, so there was a lot of road tripping back and forth. And I just remember him always, every single exit and rest area we would pass on the road, he'd say, do you have to go? Like, there's a rest area in a mile. Do we have to go? then he would know like which ones were the good bathrooms, the clean bathrooms. He's like, oh, there's a clean bathroom coming up. Do you want to stop at this one? So that's when I knew, because otherwise people just, if they don't have to go, they don't even ask. He was like hyper aware of every single exit. That was like a tell for me. That was like the thing for me. No, Colin, do you have to go? Do you have to go? Even still now, he's like that. So
sounds like an amazing human.
yes.
One thing that helps me too is thinking about the reverse scenario. I struggle with not feeling like a burden, that the things that I need are going to be a burden to somebody else. But when I start to have those thoughts, thinking about what I would do for somebody that I cared about in the situation. If my friend came to me and said, we're going on a road trip, I'm going to stop. I need to stop and go to the bathroom more because I have IBD. I would stop every chance that we got. I would do whatever is necessary for that person to feel comfortable. Those are the types of people that you want in your life. And it's okay to share those needs because you would support somebody in the same situation. There's no reason to think that other people. Yeah.
I would never, ever, 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 ever. How many evers is that? Add 100 evers to that. I would never ask. I would do that for somebody 100 times over. I would never ask ever.
But I don't remember who said this, and I don't know if it was on the show, but and hopefully I get this right, but basically like by not asking for what you need, you deny the other person the ability, the joy of giving.
Yep. Still won't ask.
Robin,
Yep.
God damn it.
Matt gets mad at me all the time. It's true. Alex, what you are saying is true. And Alicia, what you were saying is true. And what that person who did say that on this show, yes, it is 100% true. Matt, just the other day, Matt was like, you would give someone your bed and sleep on the floor. Yes, that is true. I would 100% do that. Yes, you could be mad at me about it. I would do it, but I still wouldn't ask. I wouldn't. And it's not, I mean, it is fault. I feel like it's a fault. I'm not saying that like bragging. Like that is a fault.
Robin's therapist, if you're listening to this show,
listen to this part.
Put this into the repertoire for.
Yeah, I have bumped up to every week, everyone. So don't worry. Like we have some serious work to do. Don't worry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Robin. I didn't mean to point that out. I don't mean to therapy shame you.
No, it's necessary right now. It's true. It's okay. Sometimes you just got to go more often. It's okay.
Yeah, that is very, very true. And it's helpful to know that there's those times that, when stuff comes up.
That's right.
I truly believe in that, though. Allow people to show up for you in the way that you would show up for them.
Yep.
It's as simple as that.
I'm very grateful for it. No, I'm very grateful for it. Off topic, but when I got out of surgery in 2020, middle of the pandemic, Matt called one of my very best friends to come down and take care of me. And she didn't ask. She just did for me. She just fed me. She just made me walk. She just made me take a nap. She just did it. She didn't ask me if I needed anything. If she had said, hey, are you hungry? Hey, do you need a nap? Hey, do you need a shower? I would have said no every single time. But she didn't. She just said, here's your lunch. Here's your breakfast. Let's go take a walk. If she had asked me if I needed those things, I would have said no. He called the exact right person to come and take care of me. Because if he had had my mom or my sister or even my kids or anyone else, if he had called anyone else to come and help me recover, they would have said, hey, are you hungry? Hey, are you tired? Hey, and I would have said, no, I'm okay. No, I'm fine. I'm good. I would not have accepted any assistance from them. I would have just sat on the couch with them and withered and not recovered. But he called my friend M and she came down and she just made me do it and didn't ask. And I was able to recover. Otherwise, I wouldn't have, because if she had asked, I would not have accepted. But she just did it.
Well, people talk about that, like during times of grief, when people are like, oh, let me know how I can help you. Let me know what I can do. That those are usually the times that the person has no idea what they need, or they don't want to ask, and so just kind of show up with groceries, take the person's dog and say, I'm taking your dog for a walk, or whatever it is, and just kind of do. So it's everybody get an M in your life.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, we're off topic. I'm so sorry.
No, I think this is on topic. No, this is on topic. I think it's on topic because this is how you build your support system. Exactly like Alex said, fill your coffers with people that would do for you what you would do for them, not the people that are takers.
And be willing to say yes. It's so easy to say, no, I don't need this. No, I don't need that. Just say yes. Do it scared.
Do it vulnerable. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Alex, very good advice. But our last question for you is going to be, what is the one piece of advice you have for the IBD community? And it can be a repeat if you want to go back to something you've already said, but what is the one piece of advice?
I don't know if this is advice so much as words that I live by or remind myself of, that the physical journey with IBD is not linear and the mental journey with IBD is not linear. You can be years out of surgery and living a healthy, happy life, and grief can hit you. Mourning the body and the life that you had can hit you, and that's okay. Let yourself feel that grief, feel that frustration, whatever. It's not linear. It's a journey forever. Take the good with the bad and just keep moving forward.
That was so perfect.
Alex, I think that is such beautiful advice. It really, really is. And I think so important for people to hear. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I know there's a lot more to your story that we did not go down, but we really appreciate you being open and vulnerable with us too, because especially in such a social media large place. Well, I say that we have 20 followers or something. So, but sharing your story so publicly, I know that can be really difficult. So thank you so much for doing that. Thank you also for everybody who listens. We appreciate you guys too. And cheers, guys.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you. Hey, this is Alex. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share it with your friends.